I have a little bit of an issue. If you watched my solar battery housing project, then you may have seen or heard me state that I lost some videos. What I did not realize is that when the videos were exported from my Panasonic camera, the file date and timestamp of the video did not come with it, but instead, the file's date was stamped with the date and time it was exported. What the camera export function does is encode the file name with the date and time the video was recorded. Once I renamed the files to what the video was about, the actual timestamp was lost. Here is a folder with a group of videos exported from the camera. The file date is easy to determine and the timestamp is coded hours, minutes, and seconds in a 24-hour time format. Before I rename these files, I need to get the file date properly set. Now you might be asking, how am I going to do that? This can be done with a relatively simple VBScript utility. So now it is time to put on the programming hat. Here is my folder holding the majority of my scripts, and I will be using parts of two of them to build my new utility. This one here called folder loop 3 and this one down here called change file date. We will get started by copying the folder loop 3 script into the same folder as this video's working files, then renaming it. I have most of these named as a text file to avoid accidentally running the script, so now I rename it with the VBS extension. Now in the programming environment, the first thing to notice is this line that gives me access to the Windows file system. I plan on this function executing on all files within a folder, and this line here has the folder path hard-coded, and that's not what I'm going to want. Back to my templates, and I open the one I have named drag and drop. With this code, the script will execute on all files within a folder that is dragged and dropped into the script. Now back to the script, I've made a few changes. I've changed the argument to str folder, which will be the path to the folder. I've also added a quick little error trap here to confirm that it's a folder. When I set the folder to be the FSO get folder and the string path to that folder, it will throw an error if it's not a folder. So then if there is an error, it executes these lines, terminating the utility. Also made a minor change to the log file, changing the name to rename log.txt, and that will be saved in the folder where this script is located. Now into the meat of the utility. The first thing it does after opening the log file is timestamp the log file. Then it calls my folder loop utility. It passes FSO, the name of the folder, and the log file into the subroutine. Down here in the subroutine, first thing we do is we set the root folder as an object, which contains all the objects within the folder. Then we write to the log the name of the folder. Now we look at and see if it's a hidden folder, then we're not going to process anything. If it's a system folder, we're not going to process anything. Now we get down here and it looks through each file within the root folder.files and execute code on whatever we want to do to each one of those files. Once it's done with this, it goes down and searches for subfolders within the root folder and then recursively calls this utility. For this particular thing that I'm doing and renaming these files, I am not going to do this. So this is going to be the first thing I get rid of. I do not want to process any subfolders, only the folder that's passed to it. So now let's run this thing and see what happens. Now when I run this, I'm going to drop this one that's called Part 8 Remove Form into change files date.vbs. Then it's going to run it, execute this code, and what we should see when it's done is the name of each file that it's going to process. So it's this simple. We drag this one down here and we drop it onto change file date. It executes the code, and here we've got processing folder part 8 remove form. Here's the timestamp of when it started. Here's a timestamp of when it ended, and the name of each file in that folder. So we'll make this a little smaller, move it out of the way, and open up this folder, and we can see it has the path. We look up here in the path and file name of each file. So now we're going to actually process some of these files. Now let's take a look at the finished code. A few lines were added to support access to the file dates. This was one of them. We'll need this to access the folder dates or the file dates within the folder. We added this line for formatting in the log file, and that is just tab equals 5 spaces. Now let's drop down to the folder loop, and we can see quite a few changes here. This is the date format that is in the file name, and I put this in here to give me a clue of where each one of the strings is located. On this line here, I'm going to skip any file that does not have the file extension M2TS. This is where we ended up on the last test, where it's just writing to the log file. This line right here, this is looking to ensure the first 2 characters of the file is starting with 20, as in the year 2025. And if not, then it skips, it exits everything. Now we parse out the date that's in the file. For file Y is the year of the file, month, day, hour, minutes, and seconds. These are all the locations within the file name to extract that information. Now we come down to formatting the new date. We have to decide if it's AM or PM. The date code in the file name is a 24-hour format, but the function I'm using to change the date is a 12-hour format. So by default, I have meridian equals AM. If the file hour is greater than 12, then I tell it to meridian equals PM, and then I subtract 12 from that number. Up here on this line ensures that the script file is processing file H as a number, since it was originally a string. And this line here, this is where it actually creates the string for the new file date. I put everything in the log file, what the date was, what I'm going to change it to, and then this one right here, it actually changes the file date. And the last line, it executes again, looking at the file object date last modified, which should be the new file date. So now let's run it and see what happens. Now we're ready to run. Now up here in the left corner is the folder that I'm going to test this on. It is a copy of the folder above it with only a few files in it. To the right are the files. There's one file that is not have the correct file name extension. It should be skipped. And there's 3 that should change the date. So this date should end up being the same as the date that's coded in the file name. Down here at the bottom is the actual program. So let's take this folder, drag it, drop it onto change file date, and within a very short amount of time, here is the log file. Here's what the date was, 4/12/2025, 5:11 a.m., and now the date is 3/31/6:13 a.m. And let's move this out of the way, and we can see indeed each file date now matches the date that is coded within the file name. Although this doesn't show seconds, this should be 6:13 and 10 seconds based on what we see over here. So let's just open up the properties, and indeed we can see it is changed to March 31st, 2025, 6:13:10 a.m. So that is how we can programmatically change dates in a file system. Be sure to subscribe to follow this project and hit that notification bell to be informed of future updates.